everyone, to Life Between the Notes, where we are going beyond the bio and bringing you interviews of your favorite South Central PA musicians. I'm Kirsten Myers, and my co-host Morgan Davis is joining me today, maybe with her coffee. Do you have
No coffee.
today?
I've had a whole thermos of coffee today, so water. We're on to hydration.
Me too. Yes. Yeah. Right.
We seem to
Exactly.
be on the same wavelength about that.
It is afternoon, so I do
Yeah.
have to clarify that. If this were
Oh,
10
it's
a.m.
always time for coffee.
Right. So it is a coffee kind of day, but we are so excited and grateful to have Jen Schoener joining us today. So hello, Jen. Do you have coffee?
I don't, and now I really wish I did because
Good.
I feel like
But you have water?
I really was unprepared for this, but no,
You didn't know
I'm
that
so
you were
grateful
going to
for
get.
having me. I had no idea it was a thing, but now I know. So if I ever get to do this again, I'll definitely have it with me. Yes.
Yeah, Morgan and I usually either have coffee or a cat running around, so.
There's a cat here somewhere, but
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
a
know where
good
he is right
chance
now.
I'll
Yeah.
have coffee at some point, so.
Okay, so, but before we get started, I do want to mention Keystone Music Repair, who is sponsoring our show today. Keystone Music Repair is an independent woodwind and brass repair shop in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, catering to the needs of student, amateur, and professional musicians throughout southeastern Pennsylvania and beyond. All work is done by owner and technician John Kirkner, who's been repairing instruments professionally for over a decade and has specialized knowledge in repairing double reeds. All repairs carry a guarantee that you'll be happy with the work or it will be corrected at no charge. Estimates are free, and all work is done by appointment with flexible scheduling to minimize your time without your instrument. Visit KeystoneMusicRepair.com to see more information, to get in touch and schedule an appointment, and new this year, to see a calendar of all the performances from over 40 community bands in southeastern Pennsylvania. Keystone Music Repair is happy to support Life Between the Notes. So thank you, John. So that you know a little bit more about Jen and her background, I'm going to read a little bit about her. Actually, it's a lot of bit, but but here we go. Jen Schoener is the executive director of the Upper Darby Arts and Education Foundation in the greater Philadelphia area at udfoundation.org. She recently retired as director of bands in the Eastern Lancaster County School District. She's chairperson of the Brad Schoener Memorial Music Fund, founder of the Schoener Music Man Academy, and president of Schoener Custom Music. Ms. Schoener presently serves on the board of Settlement Music School's Cardon Northeast branch. She has worked in the Elanco School District for 30 years and takes pride in the fact that the Eastern Lancaster County Band Program is the largest and oldest in Lancaster County. Most recently, in facing the crisis of COVID-19, Ms. Schoener and her Music Man Academy staff created Camp Virtuoso 2020, a 4-week online music camp that incorporated all 7 of the in-person programs of the Academy, as well as new offerings in digital music production in response to the challenges of virtual music performance. In November 2019, Ms. Schoener hosted the PMEA District 7 Youth Honors Band Fest with her colleague, Mr. Jock Heckman. Ms. Schoener has coordinated the Schoener 5K and Festival of Upper Darby Arts for the past 11 years, raising thousands of dollars to support Upper Darby children and their artistic endeavors. Recently, she partnered the UDAEF with the Upper Darby Lansdowne Rotary and increased the efforts of student volunteers in the community through her work with the Upper Darby Arts and Education Foundation Service Club. In July 2018, she was excited to partner the Schoener Fund with System Blue and the Drum Corps International 2017 World Champion Blue Devils to bring the best of the marching arts to Upper Darby at no cost to Upper Darby students. In 2021, she partnered with the Royal Butterfly Special Needs Fund and created the Music Man Butterfly Buddy Camp for Upper Darby special needs students. The Schoener Music Man Camp is featured in a documentary video on the website of national print music distributor J.W. Pepper at jwpepper.com. Ms. Schoener's national publications include Focus on Advocacy, How Save Upper Darby Arts Gave Voice to a Pennsylvania Community's Passion for the Arts, and the Oclef podcast interview, Connecting Communities Through Music Education. Ms. Schoener's passion for the Upper Darby School District has led her to Harrisburg several times to advocate for educational funding and to present how school district foundations can support the arts. Ms. Schoener also created the Gardenspot High School Band Booster Program as high school band director and founded the Bayard Rustin High School Band Booster Program in the Westchester Area School District as band booster president in 2004. She has hosted and conducted numerous PMEA Youth Band Fests. She has been a clinician for the PMEA District 7 in-services and webinars with her session on elementary band recruitment, Motivate, Educate, Infiltrate. She continues to internationally publish the incredible band arrangements of her late husband, Brad Schoener, with their company, Schoener Custom Music, keeping over 50 of Brad's arrangements in the hands of kids and their band directors. Jen has received her fundraising certification from Villanova University, her certification in educational leadership K-12 from Immaculata University, Master of Arts in Education from Gratz College, and Bachelor of Science in Music Education from Millersville University. She also served as Vice President of the Eastern Lancaster County Education Association. She resides in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and is very proud of her daughter, USMC Staff Sergeant Lauren Schoener. Lauren is formerly a member of the Commandant's Own Drum and Bugle Corps and 2015 female champion of the HITT Ultimate Tactical Athlete Competition. Ms. Schoener is also thrilled that her son Bradford is a music educator at the William Penn Charter School and is percussion captain head for Jersey Surf World Class Drum Corps. So now I need my coffee.
I really need to shorten that. We need to shorten that. Yes.
No, but that's what happens when you've done so much, and I mean, my gosh, you're so accomplished,
Oh my
and
goodness.
it's incredible, everything that you've done, which is, partially why you're here and we're talking to you today, to talk about all this great stuff that you've done. So
well, I'm excited. Although as part of it is I can't say no. I'm very bad at saying no. So it's.
So this isn't therapy, and
that's it's so long, because it's like you just keep doing things.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, and I told myself that when I did this podcast that I would not use it as therapy, but we'll see. But so to all of that, I just wanted to add that, so I have known Jen personally since I was 16 years old. So it's been 32 years, actually. So we met at New Holland Band. I think that was the first. Right. Yeah. And then later she was a student teacher at Gardenspot High School when I was a senior, I believe it was.
Believe it or not, I think that was my first year of teaching.
Or was that your first? See,
that was my first year. Yeah. Yeah. Because
wow.
I did my student teaching at Octorara with Jere Fridy.
Oh.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were my first senior class.
Wow.
Yep. You broke me in your class.
So sorry.
I will never forget anybody in that class. I loved that class so much. Yeah, they were great. They were amazing.
Well, it was fun to have you, for sure. But you were someone to admire then, and I would say even more so now. I mean, I admire you for all of the heart and, dare I say, tenacity that you put into everything that you do. But really, like, whether it's like teaching students or, supporting the Schoener Fund, raising kids or helping a friend, like, I'm just in awe of how much you've accomplished and what you continue to do. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, because I know your schedule is packed.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know whether it's tenacity or insanity. I don't give up easily. But it's usually, it's the goal is always the kids, and the goal is always to bring more music to the kids. That's the main thing.
Right.
And I guess the reason is I just, there's always somebody that comes to me with an opportunity that I never thought, that I would go in that direction.
Mhm.
And I've just learned to just try it and see where it leads. And then that's kind of where a lot of these things came from, is just talking to different people. And I never had an idea that it would actually turn out into, a project or a camp or a fundraiser,
Right.
but that's the fun part.
Yeah. And that also comes from not saying no, I guess.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. Yes.
But so we do have a lot to unpack here. But first, actually, since I am with two flutists right now, here's my question: is it flutist or is it flautist? And is there a right or a wrong? Discuss.
So the German in me has to say, like, I like the flautist, and to me it also sounded like a little more higher level. I thought, when I was growing up, I always wanted to be called a flautist, but I'm also Pennsylvania Dutch German, so that was kind of my background. But I don't know, flutist is more American.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Morgan, is there?
I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but when people ask me that, I always say that I don't say flautist because I'm not British. I always say flutist, like you said, it's like a more American. If I was British, maybe I'd feel like I could pull off saying I was a flautist. But I'm always just stuck with flutist. I always think there's a Nancy Toff book about the history of the flute, and she says something to the effect of, there's like a quote in the book about how we don't play the flout, we play the flute. and
there's
that always makes me laugh, because I think it just depends on your language background. I think they both work.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So it's whatever you want.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, within reason. Like, we don't have to get mean.
No. Well, I don't mean to be mean. But
stick to flutist or flautist. If we get so far outside of that, then maybe it's not all up for grabs.
we could combine it and make it fluoutist. I don't know.
Oh.
That sounds terrible. Okay, sorry. All right.
I got to think about that one.
So Jen, so where did you grow up? You grew up in Lancaster County, is that correct?
I grew up, in Millersville, went to Penn Manor High School, went to Millersville University. Turns out Jack Colangelo, the woodwinds professor at Millersville, he was 2 doors up from me. I grew up with him as my neighbor.
Oh.
And so I knew his kids. They were older than me, but they were part of the neighborhood gang that we hung out with. And, I had professors basically like all around my neighborhood. My best friend's dad was a biology professor, and he used to take me on family trips. And, I kind of was adopted by Millersville University before I even went to Millersville University. So, yeah. And I started.
It was a natural transition then once you.
Yeah. And it was very easy. And my flute teacher, Joel Behrens, I started studying with him, I think, when I was in 7th grade, partially with Jack Colangelo's help in finding him. And then I just stayed with him, and right on through college, he got me interested in the New Holland Band. And then I would drive from Lancaster to New Holland, which then was a long trip. And I look at how long I drive now, and I'm like, that really wasn't that long. But, for me as a kid, it was like, oh my gosh, we have to drive all the way out from Millersville to New Holland. Like, it was, a big thing. But yeah, I loved it, because I met kids that were my age that were playing in the New Holland Band, and we were all apprentices, and you were playing with all these band directors from all around the county, and it was amazing music. And you had, you had these goals every week, like, oh my gosh, like, well, she just played that passage really well. Can I come up with that by next week? Can I do it? It was a really good way to stretch yourself as a young musician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so did you started the flute in 4th grade?
I did. I started piano first. That was in like 2nd grade. And actually that was with Dottie Beam, also from Millersville University, because she lived down the street around the corner and I could walk there. And then my mom played piano. but I decided I wanted to do something different than my mom. So I picked drums actually. And then my dad was an artist and he said, no way, are you playing drums? So, because he likes his studio quiet so he can draw in peace, you know.
I see.
So yeah, so then I was like, fine, I'll take flute because it's easy to carry. And that was where that came from, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
So you were kind of interested in everything, like from the beginning.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yes. Yeah, I love music. I just, you know, wanted to be able to try different instruments. And that's why I love my job, because every half hour I get to pick up a different one. That's what I love doing.
Yeah.
Now, that's the thing that actually pushed me out of my ed degree, was that I realized I didn't like playing all of I didn't want to have to, I was like, this is too much. I just want to play the flute. This is not fun. And it was like, all of my friends who I think are really wonderful music educators in the schools now, they loved that part of our, you know, of being in school, was learning to play everything and teach everything. And I, from the beginning, I was like, this is not the right path. We need to focus. So that made me laugh when you said that, because that was like exactly the thing that I identified that was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
So, the other thing that made me laugh is, you know, the flute being a quiet instrument, or quieter. When my husband and I bought our row house in the city that's so tiny, he said, why is the flute so loud? It's so low. Isn't it supposed to be quiet? Why do you make so much noise? So, anyway.
So Jen, you mentioned your dad earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about your parents? Because I feel like they have an interesting history too.
They do, yes. That's, boy, I didn't even put that on my list.
That's okay, but you know, I've seen you, like, you've talked about your dad and.
Oh yeah, well, so my parents, believe it or not, they actually met at WGAL Channel 8 in Lancaster. My mom graduated from Eastman and was a piano major at Eastman in Rochester. And so she was originally hired. This was when they had live television. It was just starting off. Television was a new thing. And so they asked her to come on television, and she would play live piano. I think it was like the Joan Klein hour, it was like a dinner time. And she would come out to the piano and play, and people would eat dinner and watch her play piano live on TV. And then after a while, then she started to do interviews with people. She did the weather. And so, yeah, she was one of the on-air celebrities. But meanwhile, my dad, who, you know, he went into the Army right after high school. He went to the Chicago School of Fine Arts after that, and he was a cartoonist. So he was hired by WGAL, and everything was drawn by hand at that point. So he was in charge of doing any signs, any slides that you saw on the screen were all done by the art department. And so he and my mom met because my dad used to bring these amazing Lancaster County lunches that, you know, his mom would make by hand because he grew up on a farm. And my mom, her parents was a history professor, and my grandmother was a professional violinist and in Philadelphia. And so, but they didn't cook. So my mom was like raised on, you know, like the more packaged foods, and then she was attracted to my dad because of the food, which explains a lot about me.
Usually works the other way around, but
I know, right? Yeah. So that's where that came from. And then so then after a while, then they got married, and then I came along because of WGAL. I keep saying, like, I would not be here if it weren't for Channel 8, like literally. So.
That's just the coolest thing. And and I love, like, your dad's cartoons. Like, sometimes you post them, and
he's still drawing. He is still drawing.
Really?
Yep. He's going to be 92 this summer.
Wow.
And he's already designing his cartoon for his birthday. And I'm very grateful. The place where he lives, they have him do holiday drawings for every brochure issue that they put out to the whole community. And so he always has a project. Like, I just talked to him this morning, and he's like, this afternoon I'm working on my next project, got to get it ready.
So you're the apple that doesn't fall far from that tree with all the projects and such.
Exactly. Yeah, my dad will always have something to do, always. Yep.
Yeah.
That's such a cool story.
It is.
Like
Yeah.
really like bygone era though. Like you think about how many creative people were employed in different ways. Um, it's really neat.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I even have a picture in my house that my dad was going to throw out. Like, that. What? Like, it's a photograph, and it's a staged photograph of the old studio in Channel 8, when you had all the lighting were like giant, huge, heavy lights, and you have, the cameraman that's pushing this giant piece of equipment, and then they staged it. My mom is pretending to interview my dad on the set. And I'm just like, how could you possibly throw this out? This is like the beginning of my existence here. Like, right. Why would you? So yeah, so now I have it framed in my house. But yeah, it's every time I look at that picture, I'm like, wow, like this is literally like where I came from. Like, this is it,
Yeah, it's a part of history and your history.
Yes.
And yeah. How cool. Yeah. And so you studied with Joel Behrens for all of that time, I guess, right?
Yes.
And then, so did you attend festivals and such, like when you were in high school?
Oh my goodness. So I was okay. So in middle school, you're really bringing out stuff that I didn't think I was going to talk about, but okay. So in middle school, I was honestly not the best at practicing. So, and my mom and I, like, she and I would argue back and forth, and she's like, you know what, this is it. She's like, I'm tired of telling you to practice. She's like, I'm sending you to music camp for a week. And if you still hate it when you come back, she's like, that's it, you're done. You don't have to do it anymore. And I was like, all right, that's a deal. Because my 13-year-old self, that's where my brain was. So they sent me to the Elizabethtown Music Camp, which I think still is going on today, which I loved. It was amazing. And I, when I was in middle school, I could sit first chair, and I really didn't have to practice very much. And, and then I got to Elizabethtown, and all of a sudden I was like, last chair. I'm like, wait a minute. I was like, but I could play that if I practiced it, and it started to dawn on me that, wait a minute, if I really put my mind to it, I might be able to actually do something with this. And the kids that I met there, all of them were talking about, well, I'm going to try out for districts, or I want to go to regional this year. And I'm like, I didn't even know what they were talking about. I had never heard of any of that. So I managed to stay in touch with a lot of those kids during the school year. And I realized the only way I was going to see some of them again is if I made districts, or if I got to go to regionals. So my motivation was actually more social than it was musical at the beginning. But, that became my goal through high school. Like my freshman year, I managed to get into districts. I was last chair flute, which still... And I'll never forget, Steve Bowman was my high school band director, and he always made us perform our solos in front of the band before we went to districts. And number one, it was terrifying.
It is.
But number two, but I mean, that was huge. I mean, I don't know whether people do that anymore.
Some do.
I don't know. Some do. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that learning how to handle that kind of pressure was huge, because especially I remember doing it as a freshman my first time. And like, I didn't know, here are all these seniors and they're all trying out. I'm like, here I'm this little freshman. I'm like, I don't know anything. I don't even know half your names. Like, it was a big deal. But going to those festivals probably are some of my fondest memories of becoming a musician, not just for the kids that were there, but the conductors were amazing. The amount that I learned on how to listen to each other, all the backgrounds. Some would come from a military background, some would come from a collegiate background, some would, some were high school band directors. But it was just that influenced me. Not to mention, and I have to say this, that when we were in high school, if you made it a festival, Mr. Bowman would then award you like a ribbon. Okay. And I'm kind of big on the ribbons and the medal things. So so by the time I was a senior, like I was like an admiral, and it was like a thing, I don't know whether they still do that these days, but I still have all my medals like in a frame in my office, and
Right.
I loved it. If they were going to give me a medal or something that I could put on my uniform, I was like, I'll sign up. I'll do it as long as I get one of those little things, like
And
that was my goal.
it's a huge motivator,
It
of course.
is.
Yeah.
And you don't often get trophies, for being a
Yes.
musician. So I think they're sort
Right.
of like our trophies.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And
and
you
that
look
is
like you've
one
been in the
thing.
military
Hmm.
Yeah, right. You look like it. You
Yeah.
don't know. You're not. Yeah.
without
Yeah.
doing
That's a
it.
motivation.
Without actually doing it. Yeah. Yeah. But no, that kind of carried with me when I became a band director because, especially with the elementary kids, like they know, we have this award for the 5-pound chocolate bar, and the kids know, like the word spreads through the band and through the families.
Oh yeah.
Well, this is the year you get to try for the 5-pound chocolate bar. And if we didn't do that every year, like that would not be good. Like there's an expectation that you
Uh-huh.
will do that, and even I do that with our Music Man camp too. We
Hmm.
give out camper awards at the end of camp, and they are the kids already know, the ones that are the veterans. Okay, so it's for Rita's Water Ice, and then the other one's for Dairy Queen, and then you have the 5, like they know the prizes that are coming, and
Oh
they
yeah.
expect it, and like
Yeah.
that's what we need to do. And what do we
Hmm.
have to do to get that? That's the
Yeah.
big question. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Well, that's great. And then yeah, there's no going back after that. Like every year
no.
you need to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's great.
That's
And
right.
so then of course then you were in the New Holland Band. And how old were you when you were involved with that? Like you
13.
were 13, so you're like seventh
Yeah.
grade ish and
Yep. Now I
okay.
would come and Mr. Behrens would be playing, and he was the one that I was his apprentice, because you had to be assigned to to a
Oh,
musician, and he was, kind of listening to me each week, and I'd be like, okay,
that's
guess I
so
got to work on
interesting.
this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was a
because
great system.
when I joined there was well there might have been an apprentice thing, but of course there weren't any oboes at that point, so it was like, well, Kirsten, you have to do this, says Marlon Hauk.
Yeah.
And then they brought in Jeff O'Donnell to
Oh,
play the first concert that I ever played with them, and they did Scheherazade.
oh.
So here
Yeah.
I
I remember
am,
that.
16 years old, with Jeff O'Donnell, who is this amazing oboist in Lancaster
Incredible.
County, sitting next,
Mhm.
and I'm like, what?
And you're thinking this guy's gonna leave, and I'm gonna be stuck.
Yeah, and I'm like looking, like it was like the end of the concert, and he's like, "Oh, kid, you're gonna be fine. You'll be fine." I was like, "You're not staying." No. So,
Oh.
That's
but
funny.
that's great,
Wow.
with the apprentice like kind of program that they had, or affiliation.
Well, and honestly, and that again, that also carried through with the camps that we do now.
Mm.
Like, we have a lot of kids. Well, before COVID, it was working very well. Now we're kind of backtracking a little bit because of COVID, but we have campers that go for all 5, 6 years, and then once they hit that 8th grade, because they age out at once they get into high school, then we have the high school volunteer come back, and they serve as a volunteer for a year on our staff, and then they gradually work their way up every year. We call them greenies because they wear green shirts. So to become an official greenie, you have to work your way up through the years, and every year you gain more experience. And honestly, a lot of them are now music majors in college. And what's really cool is they're starting to come back as our lead teachers, but
Uh,
they've been through the camp since they were younger.
yeah.
So this is going to be our 10th year of camp, and like we're starting to see that family and that apprentice process really work well.
That's wonderful.
It's really neat. I feel like that is one of the best things about music in general. Is that if you have a good system in your music program in a public school, those kids, you see the older kids, and the little ones want to be those older kids. So when you can incorporate that inspiration of seeing students who are older than you but not by that much, just makes
Hmm.
such a difference. I mean, even when I was in elementary school, I remember our show choir coming in the elementary school and just being like, man, I just want to be one of those people. And it stuck with me, like 5 years later when you finally get the chance to try to do it. But I think it's such a cool thing because then those students start to pay more attention to what's going on around them. So you're saying like the ones who are becoming music majors and then coming back and teaching, and it's because as they mature and they start to have that awareness of, you know, what's going on around them and the impact it's making. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anywhere you can bring, you know, high school kids with elementary kids to play, excuse me, to play together, I think that would be amazing. Like we did a mega band back because of COVID. Actually, we did a mega band because it was the only way we could get everybody together to do a performance of some kind. But it was the strongest recruiting that we ever had, because the elementary kids, they just, you know, just to even see, you know, it was with the marching band, we did it on the football field. But, you know, to see, well, that's what you play in high school marching band. You know, the drummers were just, oh my gosh, they were like beside themselves, you know, because they just, you know, couldn't believe that they would eventually be able to do this, you know.
And it's only a few years away for them, you know, so it's like tangible that they can.
Right. So yeah, anytime you can have an apprentice program of any kind, I think it's huge, no matter what you're working with.
Yeah. So you chose to go to Millersville, and so who was, and overall, like, who would you say is your most influential teacher? Like, whether it was like somebody from
Wow.
I mean,
That's
is it
tough. Wow, that's hard, because there I had so many good professors. I really did.
Well, and even like just overall too, maybe not just Millersville, but like
yeah. I mean, Jack Colangelo stands out because he was just incredible. I mean, he would play clarinet and his fingers would just fly. I'm like, how do you do that? How do you move them that fast? You know? And I'll never forget our woodwinds class. He would always give us all these little, you know, secrets that I still use today with my clarinet kids, and little exercises that he would teach us. But then I'll never forget, for the, I guess, part of the final, he handed out the fingering charts for like bassoon and every woodwind instrument. And he's like, all right, here you go. He's like, I'll see you at finals. And we're like, what? And so we literally would go in the practice room with the fingering chart, and we like honking away on bassoon or, you know, whatever it was. But we learned all the fingerings on all the instruments. Like, you had to know what they were. Otherwise, that was it, you know. And I love that. To me, that was like a huge challenge for me. Gene Romig on strings was incredible. I mean, I didn't wind up teaching strings until like my last 10 years of teaching, which I didn't mind, because I mean, as long as I'm holding an instrument, I'm good. If I'm not holding an instrument, they make me sing, that's really not a good thing. But yeah, I loved it. And I could still remember what she taught me, even like 20 some years later, because she made it so that you could retain it. And a lot of the Suzuki methods she taught, even though I didn't really teach my kids Suzuki, I knew from what she taught me that, you know, these are the techniques that you want to ingrain in your students before you even go about reading the notes. You know, this is the technique that they have to master first. And that was a huge help. And Jere Friday, he was my co-op at Octorara. I love him. He fought for me on so many levels, which kind of sounds strange for me to say, but I had a very unique student teaching experience, and it was all because of him. I know that the typical student teaching experience, usually you do like elementary for like 6-7 weeks, I think it is, and then you switch to secondary. And he told my supervisor from the beginning, he's like, I want her doing everything all the time for the entire 12 weeks or 13 weeks that I have her. And he's like, here's her schedule, and you're going to go teach 5th grade music here, then you're going to hit high school chorus next, then you're going to go teach middle school band, then you're going to go do like, and so every day for 12 weeks, from the beginning, like from January through the end of the school year, concerts. I started the kids, I saw them through the task, and we finished it together.
Wow.
And I was so happy that he did that with me. because I felt like, oh my gosh, I truly can do all this different stuff. And I actually have seen it through the whole way.
That is so unique. Like that doesn't happen, I feel.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I begged for years, you know, when I had student teachers, you know, and I did not have as much luck with that. But I truly feel like if that's possible in a situation, like that's the best way to do it.
Right.
To get as many different levels as you can, to take them from beginning to end, like that's huge.
Yeah. And Jere Fridy, he was, I only knew him as a trumpet player in New Holland Band, but was he the high school band director at Octorara?
He was high school band. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, high school band, and he was the department chair. And he saved me from failing student teaching.
Yeah, so, really?
No lie, this is honest truth.
You almost.
So,
I don't.
So it was very interesting. So I was doing really well. You know, I met all the qualifications, and you know, I'm all set to graduate. And so here comes the final band concert, and of course, you know, all my whole career, all I wanted to do was conduct a high school band. Like that is my dream job. Like all I wanted to do. I was so excited, and so I really wanted to wear a tux. But my mom's like, nope, you can't do that. That's too over the top. Like, nope, you know. And my mom, you know, she was conservative. She, you know, so I knew that if she approved something that I should be okay, you know. Yeah. So, sorry, my phone's like going crazy. I don't know why. But she took me out, and we got this really cool looking, it was the 80s, remember, but you know, it was with the pad shoulders and all that, but it was a pantsuit. It was an all black pantsuit. And I was like, great, I can conduct the high school band. This is still very professional looking. She's like, it looks classy. You're okay. I'm like, my mom approves. It's got to be okay. You know, so we happened to be taking a tour with my supervisor at the time. And she's like, well, you know, what are you wearing for the concert? And I was like, oh, I got this pantsuit. It's awesome. And she's like, you're not wearing that. Oh, and no. I said, what? And I said, like, what do you mean? And she's like, no, you have to wear a skirt or a dress. You don't wear pantsuits. And I'm like, what? My mom okayed this. Like, how is this not okay? You know, and she was, and I was like crushed, because I thought, you know, like I found, you know, and he called my supervisor, because she was going to fail me. She's like, you wear that, you fail.
Oh,
no lie.
Wow.
And he called her, and they kind of had it out, and he's like, I will stake my career on her. You know, she's doing a great job. That would be crazy to fail her for what she wears, like that, you know. But that was what, in 1990 I graduated college. I mean, it really wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, like, people don't understand, like, female band directors. I've been through a couple interesting situations that people are like, that couldn't happen. I'm like, yeah, it did. And yeah. Yeah, there are very interesting situations that I feel like now we've definitely come a lot farther, but I feel like there's definitely still some wiggle room, you know. But yeah, thank you, Jere Fridy, because
wow,
that seems
he really,
wow,
yeah, absolutely.
Huh.
Yep.
And like, and hey, like, we can't even imagine like that particular situation happening. I don't, you know, but wow. So then after you were done student teaching, then was it right after that you were hired at Garden Spots for your first?
So yeah, let's see. So I did my first teaching gig with a long-term sub in Octorara. And that was, what did I do? I kind of did like a little bit of everything. But then the second year was when Marlon Half went on sabbatical. And so that's when I came to Garden Spot for a year, and I did the marching band and I did the high school band. And of course, loved the marching band, especially because that's what I always wanted to do. That was my draw. And then Marlon came back from sabbatical. And so I wound up teaching for a year at Kennett. and I did high school band at Kennett, but they had no marching band. So therefore I kept the Garden Spot marching band, and then I would drive from Kennett to Garden Spot and back and forth and do that for a year. And then my 4th year, I wound up taking over AJ Young's spot at the middle school doing 8th grade music. But I got to do the Garden Spot marching band. So I was still doing marching band that I loved, and and then after that, then when Marlon retired, then I went into the high school, middle school band at Garden Spot. So it took me a while to get to that dream job that I was looking for.
Right. So you had that, like, quote unquote dream job, but then you switched to the elementary.
I did.
After that. So was that was your choice?
That was my choice. Yeah. And at that point, I had met my husband, Brad. He happened to be, when I met him, he was elementary band director in Upper Darby. We had 2 kids, and I realized that if I was going to keep this up and keep doing high school, like I was never going to see them. Literally, I was never going to be home enough. So when the opportunity came, and then I switched to elementary, which was tough. That was not an easy decision to make. Yeah. I think that's the only time I ever cried in front of my band, but it was a tough one. I loved it. So, but it turned out to be a really good thing. Not only because I could spend more time with my family, but also it just opened a whole nother world that I didn't even know existed. People underestimate elementary music teachers. I think, at least that's been my experience. I think, in high school, everybody's focused on their subject, and they are the master of their subject, and they know a lot, which is good. But the question is, how did you get there, and who was the one that sparked you way back when, and
help you going?
And if you don't have, they call them feeder programs, which I'm really not crazy about that word, but if you don't have a good feeder program, you don't have a program.
Right.
So it's very important to really, really network with your elementary people and understand what they need, because if they don't have what they need, you're never going to get what you need. So that was a big eye opener.
It's an important relationship, and
absolutely
one does feed off of the other. So so when was it that you met Brad? Like, what year?
Let me think. I'm not sure. I think it was 1995.
Okay.
But we were both taking classes at Villanova.
Okay.
And yeah, well, sort of. Yeah. So he was standing in front of me in line, and had long black hair and a polka dot shirt and white socks, that like basketball socks, and penny loafers. And I was like, I don't know about that.
There's an interesting guy.
There's an interesting person. Yes. I was like, he must be an interesting person. Yes. And then, my friend, Dawn Main at the time, she and I were the two only female high school band directors around at the time. Okay. And so she and I were taking classes together. And so they have a picnic at Villanova, which they still do to this day. And we always credited the Villanova picnic with actually bringing us together. Because we're from Lancaster County, we don't know anything about Philadelphia. This is before cell phones. There were no GPS things. Like, we're like, we heard this thing called virtual reality, and we know it's somewhere in Philly, and it'd be really cool, but we don't know where we are. And so Brad's like eavesdropping on our conversation, and he's like, well, I know where to take you. I'll take you to Dave and Buster's. We can all go. And we're like, I guess it's okay to go with this guy, because we don't know anything about him, but he seems to be a teacher, we think. So the three of us wound up going to Dave and Buster's after one of the classes, and that's kind of where everything started.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So when did you get married?
That would have been 1998.
Okay.
And and then we wound up living in Westchester, because that was halfway between Upper Darby and Lancaster. And I'm still there because that was just a really, really good location for us. But yeah, the cool thing was, we both did elementary band. So he would write a new piece for elementary band for our gala every year. And we would eventually, we created the Schoener Custom Music Company. And that's how he started publishing his pieces. So we've got a library of over 40 arrangements that he did for mainly elementary kids. He did some middle school, but it was mainly focused on elementary. And the neat thing about his music was that you could take a kid that knew 5 notes and put them with a kid that had been playing for 3 years, and you could create this 300-piece band because they could all play together. And before COVID, like that was what we used to love to do, is just create these giant performances.
Right.
And it was because of the way he wrote his music. And he also wrote it so that it was more teaching the rhythms by rote than trying to explain to the kids exactly how to count them. He would take a tune, like for instance, like "Ode to Louie" is probably the favorite because a lot of our elementary kids like that one. But he would take "Louie Louie" and the bass part from that, but then he would put "Ode to Joy" over top of it. And that, and so that was kind of his thing. Like he would take a tune by whether it was Stevie Wonder or and put it with Bach. And I'm like, what? How did you even, like, why would you even think about putting those two songs? Like, where did that come from? Yeah. And he would just sit in a chair at the laptop and write them. Like he never had a piano in front of him. He would just do it right out of his head, which also drove me nuts because I don't know how he did that. I don't have that skill. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was really a lot of fun because we would try him out in Upper Darby, and then we would try out the song in Lancaster, and it worked in both. We're like, we got something. This might actually work,
Right.
Because it works with all kids. Yeah, so that's kind of where we got started with the Schoener Custom Music.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So what was it that you admired most about Brad?
That's a tough one.
Because there's a lot, I'm sure.
There's a lot. I mean, just musicianship, he was ridiculous. I mean, he could have been playing with any professional group and any instrument, whether it was bagpipes, whether it was clarinet. I mean, he could play them all at an extremely high level. And we would play duets, and he would cheat because it would drive. I'm classically trained, of course, so I would have to read all the notes on the page, and everything would have to be played, and he wouldn't, he would play flute along with me, but if he couldn't play it technically as fast, he would just make it up. And I'm like, you can't do that. That's cheating. And he'd be like, it still sounded good, didn't it? So I'm pretty sure it's okay. So we would go back and forth like this all the time. So his musicianship was amazing. When he got diagnosed with cancer in 2009, and I think the thing I admired most was how he handled it. We literally, looking back, like, I don't know how to put this any other way, but when you know that you have to live while you're dying at the same time, you totally live life differently. So he had stage 4 cancer for 5 years. He was supposed to live for 2 months. And it was a very rare cancer that at that time, nobody really knew anything about. But we decided that we were going to just do everything possible that he wanted to fit in. We were going to do it full speed as much as we could and still have the kids have, as normal a life as we could and keep their lives going. But yeah, I mean, I think that's how I'm, when you said, how do you organize all this? It's just because you just keep going. You just keep, taking on whatever life comes and brings to you. He kept saying to me, he's like, I'm not done. He's like, I have so much more to do here. And so, when I work on these projects, like I have that voice in my head all the time, and I'm not done yet. Like we have more to do.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I took away most.
Yeah. And that's, I'm sure, like partially where the passion and the drive come from. I mean, certainly, from your own self, but
Mhm.
his desire to keep things keep things going and have the kids still playing and making music and making it
Absolutely.
accessible, right?
Right. And he didn't want to be remembered for his cancer, because a lot of people will ask me, well, what type of cancer was it? Do you do fundraisers for that cancer, research? And I'm like, that's not what he wanted to be remembered for. He
Right.
wanted to, it's about the kids, it's about the music.
Right.
That's what was important to him.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he was very famous for just winging it. Like he would drive me nuts because I was a huge planner. Like I had everything planned how it was going to go in life. I was, and by this point in my life, I'm going to be doing this. And then by the time I'm this age, I'm going to have this. And then, of course, that all blew up. And I learned, nope, sometimes you just go with life. And
Yeah.
and you have to embrace that. You can't, we were supposed to be touring Europe by now. And we were going to play all the instruments. It was going to be an act that we did, and he would be the comedian and I would be the straight one. And like, I mean, he had all this in his head. Like when the kids were grown, this is what we would be doing,
Oh.
And so, yeah, so that didn't quite pan out. But, to look at the programs that have come about because of what he envisioned,
Yeah.
when he set up the Schoener Fund in about a month before he passed away in 2009.
Wow.
So if you had told me then that I would still be doing this, 13 years later, I never would have believed it. But yeah, if anything, it's growing, and it's because he
Yeah.
had this vision and the passion for it.
Right. That's amazing. So so during that time, like when he was diagnosed to when he passed, like how did you deal with the stress of all of that? Uh, do you even remember?
Good
Like, 'cause
question. I mean,
there's a lot you don't even.
it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I give my dad credit a lot because when he first got diagnosed, like I was a mess. Like I just kind of fell apart, and I couldn't function. Like
Yeah.
it was really rough. And Brad was like, well, I was gonna buy a new pair of sneakers, but I don't think I will now. And it was really my dad that sat us both down, and he's like, look, he's like, because at the time, like Brad wasn't showing any signs of being physically ill. We knew it was in there. We knew it was bad, but physically, I mean, he did everything he normally did. He didn't look any different. He would just get really, really tired. That's probably the biggest thing that happened. But my dad was like, hey, he's still here. He's fine. You're gonna, you're both got to get a grip and realize that, the doctors may say 2 months, but that doesn't mean they're right. He's like, right now, you just have to be there and support each other. And so from that point on, I feel like that kind of spurred us into, okay, well, what do we want to do? What are your goals? What do and that's where the Schoener custom music thing came from, because he wanted to publish his arrangements.
Right.
um and then we wanted to travel a little bit, so we managed to fit that in there. He really wanted to just focus on the kids and make sure that even though he was going off the chemo treatments, he wanted me to stay with the kids and make sure that they didn't miss Boy Scouts, make sure they didn't miss band practice or soccer or whatever it was at the time. Um, but yeah, it was tough. It was. I don't wish it on anyone. It's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It, so so actually then like with your dad, talking to you about that, maybe that like helped bring out the planner in you to
Probably.
like something to like kind of like focus on, like, okay, well,
Mhm.
let's do this, maybe we can do this. And
Yeah. No,
uh,
absolutely. And projects. They always had a project
right,
of
right.
some kind. And we also, Brad he loved having people over, and we would like he had the one year he had all of his elementary schools to our house, like on the last day of school.
Oh my.
And, or we called the Schoener Golf Classic. Was it on Labor Day? I think it was on Labor Day. But, we would literally turn our backyard into a miniature golf course, literally. Yeah. And so, we had the shot over the pool, or you'd have to, go into the shed, past the woodchuck, like, there was like all these different things that we did. And we had the band director party, and then we had the Halloween party. Like, it was never anything small. It was like usually 80 to 100 people.
Yeah.
And everybody would bring something, but it was, I guess that's kind of how I started doing events, because I was like, well, we just had 80 people. Well, all right, I can pull this off, because I know,
right.
It was kind of like a springboard for doing other things, events in the community.
Right. So you just recently retired, just last year, from Elanco, correct?
Yeah.
Right. And so was that a difficult decision?
It didn't happen when I thought it was going to. It was kind of just an opportunity came along that I felt I couldn't say no to, and the timing was where I thought it should be. I mean, I love working with my kids at school. I do miss doing that every day. And Jack, my partner, he's amazing. I love him. He's great. I felt like when the foundation came to me and said, hey, we can offer you a full-time job. At the time, I was driving 4 hours a day, several days a week, because by the time I would go to school, and I would teach all day at school, and then I would drive back to my house in Westchester, grab a bite to eat, and then I go to Upper Darby in the evening. And this was like before Zoom was a thing. Like, Zoom didn't really happen until over COVID, for the most part.
Right.
So I was just exhausted, and I was doing 2 different worlds and two different kinds of programs. But really, I think over COVID, it gave me time to think a little bit and see what I was capable of doing where. And yeah, it was the right time. It was time for me to try something different.
Yeah. And you were at that point in your career, I mean, you'd been there for 30 years.
Right. Right. So I'm still working full time. I mean, I'm retired from my public school teaching job, but I'm definitely still working.
Yeah. You just moved to a different kind of work. Yeah.
Yes. So, absolutely.
Yeah. And what did you enjoy the most when you were at Elanco? Like,
oh wow. I miss the tours. I miss the kids and the excitement, and just watching them realize what they're capable of doing, because the beginners are awesome. And I tell you, working with beginners is probably the most challenging thing, at least for an instrumentalist. Like, you just have to read into their head, like, what are they thinking? And some of these kids, they come in and some of them will just pick it up and like, oh, I got this, no big deal. But others come in and they're terrified, or they just don't understand, well, why doesn't it work the first time I do it? And then you have to kind of coach them through, well, it's going to take time, and it's not going to happen right away. And, then they'll see the kid next to them, and all of a sudden they're on page 9. And like, well, how come I'm not doing that? And then you have to, there's a lot of psychology, I think, involved with it, that you aren't aware of until you actually work with beginners. I know that my student teaching experience, I really didn't work with beginners a whole lot. I think we would visit one elementary school and give like one lesson a week. I think it was in Columbia, actually. But when you have your own band of beginners and they're all new, you really have to think, how is this gonna go at rehearsal, and how can we make it? And I told them, like, you're gonna sound bad. I told the parents, they're going to sound bad. We start off with noise, we come out with music. It's not going to happen overnight, but I just, the beginners are great. And everything you do, they're just like, wow, this is so cool. That's one thing, the big difference between high school and elementary. When I switched, high school and elementary kids, they're all the same. They don't know where their instrument is. They can't find a reed. They don't know where their music is. Like, that never changes. I mean, that's so similar. But then it's the excitement. Like, what excites an elementary kid is not what excites a high school kid. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, still, the 5-pound chocolate bar could work for a high school student, but
I think it would. I really do think it would. Yeah. I advocate for the 5-pound chocolate bar wherever I can.
I think it takes like a special personality or special type of person to work with beginners that way. And like, I think what you're saying is so true, that it's like, I mean, it's like, that's the real magic. And the number of students that I've had come take lessons with me when they're first starting, and I'm thinking, this kid is never going to get it. They're not even interested. What is happening? And then you spend some time with them and you just keep trying. And sometimes 6 months later, sometimes it's 2 years, like something clicks and they get things they haven't gotten. But to have that patience, and I think to some extent, you make a different kind of an impact with older students, but it's really special what happens when a teacher is willing to have patience for a kid who is a beginner at that age, and that you spend that time with them and then help them figure out. And you think about all the ways that transfers to their life, where they figure out that I can do something difficult, and it's not going to happen right away, and what the implications are of that when we live in sort of an instant gratification society where you take a test, you get a grade, everything happens instantly. To teach that to students at that age, it's just really important.
And I think the neat thing about, at least with Elanco district, the way we had it set up, I had kids for 3 years in a row. If they started in 4th grade, I'd have them 4th, 5th, and 6th, and we had it set up so they would stay with me those 3 years. So I truly got to know the kids. I got to see their growth. Kids that struggled for 4th grade, they struggled in 5th grade, and then 6th grade, it's like, ta-da, they got it. Like, it just, exactly. And you never know, like, and some of them, maybe they didn't get it till 8th grade. I don't know. But you keep encouraging them, and you keep, as long as they're willing to put the time in and keep trying, they're going to get it.
Yeah, and at that age, there's just a huge rate of growth.
And I think you made a good point that, you got to stay with them. And it's like, even I had a math teacher, my school district was really tiny that I grew up in, from 7th grade to 10th grade. And spending that time with this teacher who was such a good teacher and was so invested, but that walked through all these different things with me, from like algebra all the way up to calculus, and like made that subject like special and important, and they were really engaged for that. Like, you spending that time with them is probably a big part of that growth process. There's a stability in that,
Absolutely.
So the fact that your program's structured that way to have that time where they're seeing the same person has to be really impactful.
And I think, that's what we tried to encourage them as well. Like, those kids that are in band, like, they're going to be with you all through high school, and for an elementary kid to understand what kind of a long lasting relationship that is, they can't always visualize, they don't always understand that. But then by the time they get to high school, then they're the family that, then they get it.
Yeah.
But it's really neat. I do love that.
So now your new role, this is with the Upper Darby Foundation, you're a director of creative educational programming, right?
Correct. Yes.
What does that mean?
That allows, honestly, that kind of allows me to do any kind of programs, whether it's educational, artistic.
Yeah.
It gives me a lot of leeway. Okay. So I get to work with the community a lot. We formed a group this year called the Upper Darby Collaborative, which is a group we meet once a month. We just met this morning, actually, of nonprofit leaders from the area. So the YMCA, the Rotary, the libraries. We have different food distribution centers. We have some of the local churches. We have the Little League. We all come together, and it really just started as a conversation to kind of help everybody come out of COVID and figure out, wait, are you okay? Did you survive? Like, can we help you? Like, what can we do? as a team, for the community, and what can we work on together. And it also, there's a group of high school students in Upper Darby that years ago, 6 years ago, I think, we have student representatives on our foundation board. And one of them came to me and she said, we really want to start a service club. And she really kind of launched the whole thing, and it was student run. So the kids decided what projects they wanted to work on. They decide who their leaders are. They organize, the kids themselves for each project that we do. And so my job with that kind of became like a community coordinator. And so what I do is we have like a couple hundred kids in the service club. And then because now we have this Upper Darby collaborative, I say, hey, YMCA, do you need help with that food drive that you're doing on Saturdays? And so then I will connect the kids with the YMCA, or connect the kids with the libraries, or whatever project that they're working on.
Right.
And the Schoener 5K and Music Man Festival, the whole reason why we've been able to do that so many years is because these kids, they love doing projects and events. And so like, here comes my team of service club kids. And because of them, we're able to pull off this huge event. So yeah, it's that title allows me to not just do the music programming piece, but it also allows me to do the community piece, which is huge. And I think it's how the community is going to stay together and how we stay connected.
Right. Yeah. And there are other things too. I mean, that you had actually listed to me. There were like 7 like different projects that you have going on right now that you've like started with that many different things. Like how do you keep all of that organized? Like,
I mean, the nice thing is they're all kind of interrelated to some degree.
Okay.
So if, for instance, like what I did with the collaborative this morning, we're talking about what services do we want to do in the fall? Well, how's that going to, work with the service club? Well, will that affect what we do with the, festival fundraisers? A lot of them are interconnected. The Toast to the Arts that we just did, that was a big event, but we did it. There are several music teachers and art teachers that retired from Upper Darby this year. And Upper Darby is always known for their galas, which was a big foundation fundraiser, but then the money all came back to the school district. But a lot of the teachers that really have been doing that gala for the last, I think it was 22 years, they are retirement age, so a lot of them retired this spring, and we just did this Toast to the Arts to help honor them and thank them.
Okay.
So it's all kind of interrelated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not always the easiest to keep track, and that's my iPhone keeps going off with reminders of stuff that I'm supposed to do. So, yep. So that's thank goodness for the iPhone. Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah. No, that's great. So with like all of the fundraising now, so you had studied some of this at, was it Villanova that you took a course with, fundraising or certification, I guess. Right. So I don't know, is there like a big lesson that you've learned from all of the fundraising that you've done and keeping like the Schoener Fund afloat? And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, when I first started talking about fundraising, to me as a band director, it was like, that must mean hoagie sales, or it must mean something like, so fundraising as a nonprofit, much different, much larger scale, much wider net to cast. I have learned that you never know where your next funding opportunity is going to come from. Like I have a team of grant writers that we work with over the years who are dynamite, and they've learned more about the programs and they've seen them grow. So once you get a group of people that understands what your mission is and what you're trying to do for kids, they can really put that on paper and grasp that for you. So it's important to have a good team of grant writers behind you, but individual donors, you never know what's going to happen. I'll never forget a couple years ago, they did the newspaper in Delco did a story on the Music Man Festival, and somebody saw it, and when she passed away, she left us $100,000. I never knew this person. I never knew she was. I just,
Wow.
but she saw the article, and yeah, it was amazing. You just don't know.
Yeah, you
You
just
don't
don't.
know who you're going to affect, or you don't know who you're going to touch with whatever you're doing with the kids or whatever your mission is.
Yeah.
Um,
And all
yeah,
you can
they're
like, keep putting it out there, right? Like with articles, or whether it's your writing or videos, or
Mhm.
putting it out there, and then you...
Yeah, and honestly, like support comes from many different places. You don't know.
Mhm.
There's a system, with fundraising that they teach. You have to have donor outreach, and there are all these facets to it, which is all true and very important. But when it comes down to it, like, you just don't know who that person is, or that
Mhm.
where that opportunity is going to come from. So
Right.
you just have to be aware of that all the time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely learned a lot.
Yeah. And obviously, like, it's working because you've helped build such an amazing program. Um, so beyond that, what do you, now this is kind of getting back to just music education. Like, what do you feel now that you've taught for 30 years and you're doing what you're doing now? What do you feel is the biggest challenge facing music education today? So, like, considering this like as like post COVID, if we can call it that right now, um,
Mhm.
like, what what do you think is the biggest challenge?
Mhm. That's a tough one. I mean, I feel in some ways music has come a long way because of COVID, just because it's kind of forced us to look a bit more into the digital world than we were before. Um, as a teacher that has not been trained in many digital techniques that the younger teachers are, we just weren't. Um, that I think that really kind of expedited things. But I think for young music teachers starting out, there are certain things now that more than ever I feel that are more important. Um, for instance, like urban music education versus suburban music education.
Mhm.
Um, there was actually a session on this at the PMEA conference back in April, which I thought was fascinating. The way urban schools, Philadelphia School District, like, they don't have football fields, they don't have marching bands.
Mhm.
What they're doing with their music education is not really what I learned in my suburban music education experience.
Right.
And so you have all these people graduating, looking for these marching band jobs, but the jobs are in Philadelphia, they're in urban areas. Um, but are they actually, are we being trained well enough to go into those areas? Um, so I thought that was a really interesting conversation. Um, so I feel like that's something that I don't know if the collegiate levels need to look at that more. And I don't know. I don't know. Can you offer an urban experience if you're not anywhere close to a city? Like, what are you gonna do? Like,
Mhm.
how do you correct that?
Right.
But I see that as especially in Upper Darby, because it's right on the edge of Philadelphia.
Mhm.
That's a big thing.
Well, and too, with the way that like technology is changing everything, like it's a different way of teaching for sure than what we were taught when we were going to school.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it is in the training that you get at the college level.
Yeah. And I think I really, if I were giving any advice, like, I would say add some music therapy classes.
Mm.
Um, because I think music educators, we're being put into special education classrooms more so, and they're kind of expecting more of a music therapy experience, but yet again, we're not always trained in that.
Right. Yeah.
So that, and that's really come from working with these special needs camps that we do in the summer. Because we have a team of music educators with music therapists. And that combination for me has been an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Because how therapists approach things is different than how an educator approaches things, which you wouldn't really, I mean, I wouldn't think that originally, but that's huge.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a big like social emotional component to that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think one big advocacy thing that I feel really music people need to really kind of push is that we're the only thing left that teaches kids how to listen. Everything else is visual. Everything else is, putting it on paper, which is all great. But we're taught from a very young age, well, listen to the person next to you, listen to the group, listen to the whole band or the orchestra. Like, we listen all the time. And I feel like, especially in our world right now, people are forgetting how to listen. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to be in charge, or, but it's like, that's not what it's about. It's about listening. And yeah, I feel like that's becoming lost in our education system. So I'm advocating for the listening platform, whatever that is. I don't know. But that's what I really notice more than anything. And kids need to be able to be kids. Brad used to do recruitment for Upper Darby, and he always would wear a suit and tie to school, no question. Like, Upper Darby always was very well dressed when they were teaching. And what was funny to me was, when it was recruitment time, he would put on the loudest, most obnoxious shirt, tiger shirts, hologram shirts, prism shirts. Like, I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, you be the fourth grader. He's like, would you want to take lessons from the guy in the suit and tie, or would you want to take lessons from the guy in the tiger shirt? And like that stuck with me, because he's absolutely right. Like, he understood how kids think, and that's, I think we lose that. Like, it's okay to be a kid. That's why they're kids. Like, they don't have to be, that's very important.
I think that's great, because like when I first moved to Lancaster, everybody kept saying like, oh, well, you're so young, like that's why everybody wants to take lessons with you, because you're so young and whatever. And it's like, what happens when I'm not young anymore? Am I not a fun teacher? Am I not like it? I think that's the first time I've heard somebody say it in a way that, like, it's not about your actual age, it's about embracing that ability we all have to be a kid at heart, or to, even with teenage students, to reconnect yourself to what it's like to be in their shoes. Doesn't mean that you're not the adult in the room, or that you can't age, but I think that's a really, you made that point in a way that I haven't heard anybody make it yet. It's always, oh, well, you're just young. Well, what about when I'm not? But it's like embracing those things in a way that helps the kids understand that they can connect to you.
Yeah. And that's so important. Like, that's why the Music Man Camp that we provide, yes, it's your Music Man Camp where you go, you play your instrument, you have a lesson, you go to sectionals, you play in a large ensemble. Like, that's what your traditional music camp looks like. The way Brad envisioned it, we also combine, like, some years we've done like Frisbee competitions. And then, some years every year we've done a little bit of yoga, and we talk about breathing and anxiety and, stage fright and that sort of thing. Or if you go to take a test or something like that. We have conducting class. We have, various musicians come in. Like, this year we're going to have a harp major from Westchester, who's an Upper Darby grad. She's going to come in and do a harp master class. But then the next day we're bringing in Snack Time Philly, who plays for the Sixers halftime shows, and a lot of those guys are Upper Darby grads. But like, I try to keep it so, like, every day the kids walk in and they're like, what? We're doing what? Like, I want that wow factor. Right. Like, I don't want it to be just same kind of thing all the time. Yeah. So that's important.
So much of what you're talking about is, like, I think just good teaching. Like, it's like seeing the bigger picture. It's like when you were talking about being with your students in elementary school for a period of time, it's like the consistency allows them to make those connections. And then also just, like in this situation, it's like you have a broader perspective of like what makes things enjoyable and keeps them on their toes and but you're also helping them make connections about how, even if they're not musicians, how all of it's important, how it fits, why it's worth doing. And it's just having like the bigger picture in mind always when you're doing these little bits and pieces that end up fitting together.
Absolutely. And I feel like in public schools, at least, I know, we're getting so confined by time and, by how much attention we can give each kid. And, when you're trying to do a bigger picture, it gets harder and harder to do the bigger picture.
Right. And when you're being measured on such small scales all the time.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So our time is up for the most part, but I do have one more question for you.
Oh boy. Okay.
Now, this is more for me than anything, but what kind of music do you listen to? Do you have a Spotify playlist? Like what is it that you're listening to when you're in your car?
I have a very eclectic playlist. It's funny. So I admit I love Jacob Collier. I'm a huge Jacob Collier fan. I have my Rainbow Crocs at home. He's just amazing. But it depends on the day, honestly. Like it could be the classical station, it could be the jazz station, it could be the Dua Lipa on Pandora. Like I don't know. Like it's whatever kind of hits me.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever have
I don't
band when you were growing up?
A favorite band?
Yeah. Or favorite artist?
Favorite artist? Well, I was always big on Sting. Sting was always good. The Police, Sting. I don't think I ever had a favorite. It's just I like all different kinds of music.
Yeah.
I finally got to go to Nashville. I guess it was right before COVID. Oh my gosh. I mean, I never really listened to country or, but holy cow, like that opened a whole nother world for me, but it's, there's so much out there, and I try not to get like into one thing too much before I try something new.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting about Nashville because we went there a few years ago. Like our family went, and I was like, I don't like country music and what. But we went down. It's the city is just amazing because there's just music everywhere, like every corner, every restaurant, and the history there. It's just.
Well, and if you talk to the musicians that are in the bands, they're like, the one guy was a fiddler. Can't think of his Jared. I can't think of his last name. He's not. I don't think he's there anymore. He's doing a studio thing now. But his fiddler was incredible, and I was looking at his technique because, of course, I was like relearning my violin technique for my kids, and I was like, oh, he looks like he knows what he's doing. Okay, and I could tell like he was classically trained, but he's playing all these crazy parts, with this country tune. And I went over to him like, where did you learn how to do that? He's like, oh, I went to Pittsburgh. I was classically trained. So that's part of, what we brought to the Music Man Camp is Ryan Joseph, who happens to be the fiddler for Alan Jackson's band.
Okay.
So he comes to us every year and he teaches kids how to fiddle at Music Man Camp.
Cool is that?
So he's coming back this year, and like we're so excited because he's awesome. He's really good with the kids. But I mean, you just never know,
right,
what their history is, or like how did you get here, And some of them weren't classically trained. Some of them have just taught themselves, which is also amazing to me. Like, how did you figure that out? But yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jen, thank you so much for talking with us today. This has been great. Yeah, I'm so glad you were able to take the time to join us.
This is fun. It was a lot of fun.
And thanks again to everyone who is listening today. If any of our listeners have questions or suggestions, you can always email us at lifebetweenthe notes@gmail.com. In addition, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So thank you, Jen. Thank you, Morgan. And we can do our Zoom wave. And thank you very much.